I caught up with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent for an exclusive interview at the Reagan National Economic Forum in Simi Valley, California over the weekend, just days after his first meeting with newly sworn-in Federal Reserve Chairman Kevin Warsh to discuss negotiations with Iran, the president's economic agenda, and the resilient economy and markets. Let me get your take on what we're discussing in terms of the Iran war. How will you ensure that they keep their promises? I mean, after all of the lies and the back and forth with the Iranian leadership, do you have confidence that they're going to keep a promise?
Well, what I have confidence in is that President Trump's going to hold them to it. That with the Iranians, we'll see. Their government, as I've said, we didn't have regime change, but we changed the regime. The first layer, there was decapitated, second layer decapitated. We're on the third group, so maybe they've seen what happened to the others, and they see that what President Trump is willing to do. So if President Trump agrees to this deal, I would tell the Iranian leaders right now, he will enforce it, and both military and economically.
So what are the markers that you're going to use to ensure that they're keeping their promises?
Again, we'll see that the easiest is freedom of navigation in the Gulf, through the Strait of Hormuz.
Right.
Got to go back to the way it was before. The U.S. Navy has been fighting pirates since before we were a country, and we're not going to put up with these pirates. So, but this is a chance for the Iranian leadership to try to become a normal country. They've been a pariah country for 47 years. They're the largest state sponsor of terrorism. And the Iranian people, they have a rich history. They're great merchants. They have great culture, music, food. And it is a once-in-a-generation chance for the Iranian state or the Iranian people to come back into the global system.
I know that the president has led this obliteration of Iran in terms of the military, but your programs in terms of economic fury, what do you believe was the most significant in terms of sanctions and the economic power that you have put against Iran?
Well, I think there were three parts to it. So I think going in 5.5, 6 weeks on the military, a lot of turmoil there, a lot of their services, a lot of their factories for missiles, drones, taken out of commission. Secondly, it was the economic side in terms of what we've done. And a big mistake that the Iranians made was attacking their GCC neighbors, their neighbors in the Gulf, because we had many very good allies who maybe weren't completely transparent with us on the money, Iranian money that was in their banking systems, all of a sudden became very compliant in terms of being willing to turn over accounts or help us freeze, block accounts. And then the third part was the incredible blockade. I really think it's the economic blockade of funds and the physical blockade of the ships not going in or out of the Iranian ports. Karga Island is shut down. That's their big oil loading facilities, and that means that they're going to have to start taking down the wells soon.
Now, a lot of people have asked me recently, will President Trump finish the job?
Well, again, what does finish the job mean? Because if finish the job means making sure that Strait of Hormuz is open, that we get the highly enriched uranium, and that Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon, that is finishing the job.
Okay.
That's finishing the job. And to be clear, that by whether it's the military intervention, the blockade, or the economic fury, this is the first time the Iranians have ever been willing, 47 years, have been willing to discuss not having a nuclear weapon. It was, a verboten subject, and now it's on the table for the first time, thanks to President Trump.
That is such an incredible point. You're right about that. Let me get your assessment of the economy today. Are you surprised that the markets have been incredibly resilient, that the consumer seems to be still holding up, even though we are seeing a spike in inflation?
Well, again, it's a very limited spike, I think. If you look, it's energy-driven. It's a supply shock. We will get to the other side of this. Markets live in the future. Markets are looking through this. And another way to phrase it, Maria, though, is many people have said to me, are you surprised that the market's gone up on bad news? And I said, I don't think the news is that bad. I think the news is bad. The quality of the reporting, the anti-Americanism, people are so anti-President Trump, anti this administration that I have perfectly asymmetrical information, and I know we have the Iranian Navy, their Air Force, the 80–90% of their missile factories they are done in, their launch facilities. I know 50% of the military is not getting paid. Police aren't reporting to the stations. I mean, if you were to look at a lot of these major news outlets, and especially the newspapers who now like putting opinion on the front page rather than facts, you would think we are losing. This is a wipeout. We wipe them out. So no, I'm not surprised because, again, the information that I have, that we're looking through this.
But you've got to communicate that to people before the midterms. I mean, President Trump and yourself obviously have been balancing this, getting rid of a potential nuclear terrorist with the idea that oil prices and gas prices have to go down before the midterms.
Well, they will. Oil prices, crude, West Texas is down about 20–25% from the closing peak a couple of weeks ago. It's down about 12% this month. Gasoline prices are down, I think, about 5% now, and they will go back down. And again, that we understand that there is a disturbance here, that it's uncomfortable for people, but we're going to get to the other side of that. And I think on the other side, the oil market is going to be very well supplied. The UAE has come out of OPEC. I think we maybe got some permanent demand destruction out in Asia. So I am very confident that the energy prices are going to come down very quickly, that we had record tax refunds, I've told you before, 44% of filers, 62 million forms we had filed, they applied for one of the president's 4 signature tax policies: no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. They limited tax on Social Security. 85% of our seniors didn't pay tax on their Social Security, and deductibility of auto loans for American-made cars.
Well, the deductibility and the expensing options have been incredible for businesses, and I do think that was a major tailwind for earnings.
And we're seeing that factory construction and manufacturing construction, up 17–19%. And you know what happens, Maria? Construction jobs of facilities turn into manufacturing jobs. We've seen an uptick in manufacturing.
Secretary, I was very surprised that the Senate left without delivering the reconciliation package for funding of immigration. And I just wondered what was behind that. What are your thoughts on that? Was it really the anti-weaponization fund? Was it something else? Was it President Trump's support of Ken Paxton? What was it?
Well, Maria, I was a civilian most of my life. I've only been in D.C. 15 months, so I've learned not to try to predict what motivates people up on the Hill. But what I do know, what motivates the Republican Senate, the Republican Congress, House, is they'll come back. We will get this done. And they do want to work with President Trump and for the American people. There's that. We also want to get the Clarity Act done to make us the digital asset capital of the world. That everyone says to me, well, crypto is this or that. So all the nonsense goes on offshore. If we bring it on shore, have U.S. best practices, a great regulatory framework like we do with securities, like we do with commodities, then that will be very important for crypto. And there are a lot of other things that we got to get done before the summer break.
Secretary, do you have an update for us on tariffs? I know some of the tariffs that are in place will expire in the coming weeks, right, after the Supreme Court decision. Was the president planning on any changes in terms of the tariffs?
So what's going to expire is what's called the Section 122. It's a kind of an emergency 5-month authority that we put on. It's a 10% global tariff. And along with that, we have existing 301s and 232s. But right now, to go back to the tariff structure, the deals that we've struck with countries around the world, whether it's Japan, China, Europe, the whole EU, EU's willing to pay 15% tariffs and take down the tariffs on us. It's an incredible deal. So what's happening now is Ambassador Jameson Greer, U.S. Trade Representative, is doing studies, Section 301. And if those studies are successful, those 301s will get recalibrated to the exact level of the trade deals we had with the countries.
Meanwhile, the Trump accounts have been incredibly successful in terms of the conversation and the amount of demand out there. I will tell you that my niece just had a baby, and she's 7 weeks old, and I'm encouraging them to sign up for the Trump accounts. This was such a good idea. And you said in your remarks that financial literacy has always been important to you. Same with me. It starts at home, doesn't it?
It does. It does. And look, your niece has no better role model, but for many people around the country, 38% of American families have no exposure to our great equity market. They don't participate in the innovation, in our economic engine. They don't understand our great management. So with the Trump accounts, with the children who were born during President Trump's administration, Treasury will seed those accounts with $1,000. But anyone with children under 18 should open a Trump account because many of the great philanthropists are also putting money in. Families can put up to $5,000 in per year, per child. And many states are going to participate. Corporations are going to participate. Comcast is participating.
This is such a great idea,
Yep.
Secretary. Thank you for that. All right. The president and yourself have had such courage in terms of doing things that past presidents, past Treasury secretaries would not do. I mean, it's countless. And I want to talk a little about the potential for another courageous move, because here we are at the Reagan Economic Forum, and 40 plus years ago, under President Ronald Reagan, mandatory spending was 1/3 of all federal spending. Today, it's 2/3 of federal spending. Is that something that the president is going to tackle?
I'll tell you, Maria, what we got to do, we got to get the short term in order before we get the long term in order. So that we had a fiscal contraction for fiscal year 2025, that when I got to Treasury, that the year before we'd had the worst budget deficit when we weren't in war, weren't in a recession, 6.7% of GDP. We brought that down to about 5.5, 5.4%. And I've talked about trying to get it down, something with a 3 in front of it by the time the president leaves office. So we've got to get that under control before we can tackle the big problems.
And because, I mean, if we're continuing to spend all this money on Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, we won't have any money left to spend on anything else, right?
Again, we got to work on the here and now. You know, I always call it crawl, walk, run. That we came in, that we were crawling. Now we're getting upright and starting to walk. And I think once we solve this, we can think about running.
How soon do you expect some of those other things, putting oil and gas aside, talking about fertilizer and memory prices and other things that are costly?
Okay, so fertilizer is a direct result of the Strait being closed. A lot of the raw materials coming out of there. So again, that's going to roll down. 75% of the fertilizer needs for U.S. farmers had already been taken care of for this planting season. So that I am confident that we will have ample fertilizer at a good price for the 27 planting season. And then some of these, memory is just a function of demand. It's just a function of demand. And Micron, thanks to President Trump, they 100% expensing for their new factory. They're out in Virginia. They're bringing it onshore. So it just means we have a boom.
I got to ask you about the $250 bill that the president is talking about in terms of putting his image on the $250 bill. Is this really going to happen?
Well, we'll see. There's pending legislation in the House. If it passes, then we'll do it. And Maria, I think it's fitting. President Trump is the president during our 250th anniversary. That Calvin Coolidge was president during the 150th anniversary, and there was a coin printed for him. And I think it's a great celebratory note for a great president.
And will we also have a coin with President Trump's image?
There's already a coin.
There's already a coin.
There's already a coin. So Treasury, we have sketched it out, what it would look like, because we have to prepare way in advance. And if the legislation passes, then we'll do it. If it doesn't, we won't.
Now, what about your currency? Because has that been printed yet?
It's been
Scott Bessent signed dollars and currency in general?
It's been printed. The bills haven't been registered with the Federal Reserve. You'll be seeing more on that probably in the next 2 weeks.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.